Sarah's work barbecue was one of those long, boring things. John was glued to his phone, like always lately, barely paying attention to anybody. So when this guy Mark started talking to me, I was grateful for the distraction. He was cute, with this easy way about him, and when he found out I was into old cars too, we talked for ages. It was refreshing, just having someone who actually seemed interested in what I had to say. After that, I can't say it was a coincidence that ran into him at the gym. Maybe I started going a bit more often, maybe I picked my workout times a little more carefully. He always seemed happy to see me, and we'd joke around while we worked out. It felt nice. Not like with John, not anymore. John just seemed tired all the time, or distracted. I didn't know what was going on with him, but I did know that he and I hadn't had a real conversation in ages, not one that didn't revolve around bills or what to make for dinner. Mark made me feel awake. We'd text now and then about cars, or about stupid stuff happening at work. I'd never done anything like that before. It felt exciting, but a little scary too. One night, after John was asleep, I stared at a text from Mark for a long time, debating whether to reply. He was just a friend, right? Friends can talk. Even late at night. But was this getting a little too friendly? I wasn't sure, and that uncertainty twisted something in my stomach that felt a lot like guilt. The next morning, I felt jumpy. On edge. Whenever my phone buzzed, my heart would skip a beat. Was it work? Was it John? Or was it Mark? The anticipation made me feel alive, but also strangely off-kilter, like I was leading some sort of double life. It was exhausting but thrilling all at the same time. I couldn't stop the back and forth in my head. Was I overreacting? Or was this the beginning of something more? Something I wasn't sure I was even ready for? The thing about guilt is, it shows. I tried to hide it, to smile like always, make John's favorite dinner to try and overcompensate. But he noticed. Of course he did. Husbands always know these things, don't they? Everything okay, babe? He asked one evening, out of the blue. His question hung in the air, heavy as a thundercloud. Yeah. Fine. Why? I retorted. Maybe a bit too quickly. A flicker of something crossed his face. Worry maybe? Was I imagining it, or hoping it was worry, and not suspicion? You seem, I don't know, different lately, John said, choosing his words carefully. Always on your phone, going out more, it's just not like you. People change, John, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. And maybe I'm tired of being the same old boring person. My words were meant to sting a little, to deflect his question. That shut him up for a while, but it did nothing to quiet the fight going on inside my head. The car shows with Mark weren't just about the cars anymore. We'd go for walks afterward, grab a coffee, and just talk. It felt so easy with him, not forced like things had become with John. And then the messages started getting later. We'd be up way past midnight, half joking about car parts, then spilling bits of our lives to each other. Mark's marriage was struggling too, he told me. He felt like he and his wife were roommates, not partners, and his complaints echoed my own unspoken frustrations. Late one night, a message from him made my heart thump harder. I think about you all the time. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. Should I just pretend I didn't see it? Was that even an option now? A traitorous, reckless part of me wanted to write back, to say I felt the same way. Instead, I closed the app and tried to sleep, the weight of his unspoken words pressing down on me. I was playing a dangerous game, and I was starting to realize I wasn't sure how to stop, or if I even wanted to. The excitement, the secrecy. It felt intoxicating, a stark contrast to the dull predictability of my life with John. John, ever the practical one, booked us a surprise weekend trip to celebrate our anniversary. He meant well, bless him, but my stomach twisted into knots when he told me. The thought of spending an entire weekend with John, forced to pretend everything was fine, felt stifling. Don't get me wrong. The cabin was cute, a crackling fireplace and all, but all I saw was the empty space beside me. The conversations would stall halfway through dinner, the forced smiles and awkward attempts to fill the silence with small talk would be agonizing. The whole getaway, I was on edge, irritable. My phone buzzed constantly, and I'd invent excuses to step away, a sudden need for fresh air, a forgotten item upstairs. Once, I even pretended to have a headache so I could cut a dinner date short and lie restless in bed, waiting for that familiar notification that meant Mark was thinking of me too. Just a little longer, he texted, his words a balm against the aching loneliness I felt even next to my own husband. Late into the night, we talked, our voices hushed on the phone, spilling out the unspoken frustrations, the desires we kept hidden in the daylight. We both knew it was wrong, but the thrill of the secret, the taboo nature of it all, it was addictive. Back home, it got worse, or maybe it got easier, a terrible kind of easy. John's job got crazy busy, he was working late all the time and coming home exhausted. I was alone more often than not. At first, the silence in the house felt deafening, a constant reminder of the distance growing between us. Then Mark filled it, text messages during my solo dinners, a quick meme shared during my lunch break, little flirtatious pick-me-ups sent straight to my phone throughout the day. The guilt still gnawed at me, a constant companion I couldn't shake. But it was mixed with something else: anticipation, desperation, a hunger for the connection I was missing. Mark was filling the hole in my life that John wasn't even aware existed, and as terrible as it felt, it also felt strangely exhilarating. Maybe it wasn't just Mark or my boredom, maybe there was something broken in me, some part one hadn't even recognized, that was seeking fulfillment outside of my marriage. Whatever it was, I found myself further and further down this dangerous path, one late-night text at a time. The day John told me about his work conference, my heart did a little skip. 3 nights alone, 3 whole nights where I wouldn't have to hide whispered phone calls or invent tired excuses. I'm a terrible person, I know. But as awful as it felt, I couldn't deny the thrill of possibility coursing through me. Like clockwork, the same day I found out about John's trip, an email popped up from Mark. Business in Chicago, it read, small world, huh? The wink emoji at the end told me everything. We wouldn't say anything outright, but we both knew what this meant. The hotel room felt strange at first, generic furniture, an oversized bed, stark and impersonal, yet buzzing with the wrong sort of energy. The first time Mark touched me, my hands shook. This wasn't some flirty coffee run, this was crossing a line I'd never even thought possible. But his eyes held a sort of desperate pleading, echoing the same hidden want I'd felt for so long. Guilt sat in the corner of the room like a silent observer, a buzzing fly I could swat away for a few hours but always returned. Yet, the excitement, the sheer exhilaration of sharing a secret with this man, was overpowering. And later, after, amidst the rumpled sheets, I wouldn't even let myself think too hard about what I'd done. Home felt alien after those few days. John seemed so happy to see me, unsuspecting and trusting, and it made my insides twist. He surprised me with a beautiful necklace, a sparkly thing that hung heavy around my neck like a physical weight of my betrayal. We went out to dinner, and he laughed at my jokes, talked about his week like it had been perfectly normal. "You've been on your phone a lot lately," he said at one point, catching my eye with a gentle look of concern, not accusation. "Especially late at night." I froze. My forced smile felt painfully obvious, my voice too high when I replied, "Oh, just silly work stuff, you know how it is." His eyes held mine for a beat longer, but then he nodded, the worried crease between his brows fading. Guilt stabbed at me, sharp and hot. But just as quickly, I pushed it down. Mark would understand, right? Mark was going through the same thing, wasn't he? It wasn't just me, it couldn't be. The invitation from Sarah felt like a cruel joke. A weekend getaway with her and her husband, plus Mark. Of course, they didn't know. Nobody knew. But even the thought of being around him in this forced, social situation was enough to set my stomach in knots. John seemed excited about it, oblivious to the internal battle I was fighting. The house they rented was huge, all exposed beams and floor-to-ceiling windows. It meant less chance of getting caught, but it also made it impossible to avoid Mark. Even while surrounded by people, there was an invisible thread connecting us. A touch that lingered too long while passing the salad at dinner, a shared look when someone told a slightly off-color joke, a brush of hands while getting drinks in the kitchen. Each time, a spark ignited, a reckless thrill coursing through me. It was like we were playing a dangerous, unspoken game, our movements calculated under the noses of our unsuspecting partners. Sarah chattered away about decorating ideas for their house while I sipped my wine, desperately trying not to stare at how Mark's shirt clung to his shoulders when he reached for another bottle across the counter. Late one night, I heard a soft knock at my door. Mark. One look at his face, flushed and eyes bright, told me everything. He didn't have to say a word. In that moment, in that quiet moonlit hallway, the consequences felt impossibly distant. All I knew was this overwhelming urge, a need to fill the hollow space inside me that had been growing for so long. The next morning, that sickening buzz of my phone broke through the heavy fog of sleep. A text. Mark. But the screen went black before I could catch the words. Something felt wrong. I turned over. And then my blood ran cold. John was holding my phone, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. I scrambled for an explanation, some excuse, but the dam had broken. He knew. The argument that followed was a hurricane, tearing through our carefully constructed life. Years of bottled-up frustrations, of unspoken needs and disappointments, exploded in harsh accusations and tear-filled confessions. John's voice cracked when he spoke of trust, of love lost. My own tears burned as I tried to apologize, trying in vain to explain the emptiness, the desperate feeling of drifting I'd been fighting. Nothing made sense. Everything was a shattered mess on the bedroom floor. After the fight, after John choked out the words, "I need some space," and slammed the door to the guest room, all that was left was the deafening silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, fingers tracing patterns on the too soft comforter. Everything felt wrong, twisted, like the world had tilted on its axis. Night fell, heavy and oppressive. Sleep was a cruel joke. I closed my eyes but only saw flashes of John's face, the hurt and anger etched so deeply it made me physically ache. My mind conjured up our wedding day, usually a happy memory, now distorted. I heard his vows, promising forever, but all I could see was the look of betrayal from earlier that morning. The next few days passed in a painful haze. The house was vast and empty, John a ghost who moved through rooms with tight lips and cold eyes. His silence was worse than any screaming match, it was utter rejection, confirming my worst fears about myself and what I'd done. I wanted to apologize, to try to explain, but I'd lost the right to any of that. Each time I opened my mouth, all that came out were empty, pathetic excuses. I tried to busy myself, doing laundry, cleaning the kitchen until the countertops sparkled. Anything to distract from the churning guilt in the constant loop in my head. How did I let this happen? What was wrong with me? Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in the too-big bed, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator or the occasional creak of the old house. I'd stare at the ceiling, imagining Mark's face, trying in vain to recapture the thrill of those secret moments. The adrenaline had been replaced by a deep, bone-aching fear. Fear of what I'd done to my marriage, my life, and worst of all, fear of what was next. I craved answers, resolution, some sign that it was possible to fix this, but John's icy silence was an insurmountable wall. A week. It took him a week to finally break the silence. It might as well have been a decade. I jumped when I heard his voice, raspy and strained, coming from the doorway of the living room. "We need to talk," he said. There was no anger, no yelling. Just a flat monotone that scared me more than any shouting could have. My mind raced. Apologize? Plead with him? Fight back? A lump rose in my throat, threatening to choke out any words I could manage. He sat on the worn armchair across from me, looking older somehow, the easy smile I once loved now replaced with a hard line across his lips. I want a divorce, he said simply. It felt like a physical blow, even though I'd known deep down this was coming. John, I started, my voice barely above a whisper, but the words caught in my throat. It was pointless, we both knew it. Some things, once broken, simply can't be mended. Somehow, with a strength I didn't know I had, I choked out. Okay. Maybe some part of him, or maybe just some part of me, hoped for a flicker of emotion. Sadness, regret, even a flash of anger. But there was nothing, just a chilling acceptance that made the finality of it all so much worse. In the days that followed, the mundane became excruciating. We existed side by side, like strangers forced to share a cramped hotel room. The lawyer consultations were a blur of legal jargon that barely registered in my shocked mind. Gone was the sweet, somewhat shy man I'd married. In his place, a calculating stranger fought over who got to keep the stupid coffee mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon. We split our CDs like children dividing up toys, the music that was once the soundtrack to our lives now just another thing to be fought over. I winced when his hand lingered near a few of my favorites, a petty jab amidst the clinical division of our possessions. Even packing my things felt wrong. My clothes folded into boxes that would soon leave this house, the house that was supposed to be our home. The ache of what we'd lost was a constant presence, a weight that settled deep in my bones. Sometimes I wanted to scream, to rage at him, at myself, at the whole damn unfairness of it all. But pride, that last stubborn shred of it, choked back the worst of it. I played it cool, matching his cold efficiency with my own. Because what else was there left to do? Sarah cornered me at a neighborhood barbecue a few weeks later. Her smile was tight, and her eyes flickered over my shoulder as if searching for John. It wasn't hard to figure out that he'd spilled at least some version of the truth to her. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice pitched low, a weird mix of sympathy and awkwardness. I had no idea. My cheeks burned. Sarah, it's okay, it's between me and John, really, I insisted, even though the words tasted like ashes in my mouth. She nodded, but not convincingly. The other women in our shared circle of friends drifted by, offering brief hugs or forced smiles. The pity in their eyes stung worse than open anger would have. News of the divorce had traveled fast, and with it came the whispers, the judgment, the way everyone looked at me like I was an empty shell of the woman they once knew. Mark was another ghost in my life. When the truth came out, his promises of us against the world melted away faster than snow in a summer heat wave. A hurried phone call, his voice strained, I'm transferring out of state, fresh start, you understand. Then a week later, nothing. Not even a goodbye text to mark the pathetic end of our disastrous little affair. His silence was an echo of John's, only worse, somehow. Betrayal came in different forms, I realize. John's hurt was raw and honest, but Mark was a coward, the kind of man who vanished at the first hint of trouble, leaving me with the bitter realization that I'd traded my whole life for someone who didn't have the spine to even apologize. The ache of loneliness settled over me, heavier than before. Dinner parties and girls' nights out were no longer invitations but reminders. I'd stare at the ringing phone, hoping for a friend's voice, a flicker of my old life. Instead, there was the constant echo of unanswered texts to Mark, the silence from my once bustling social circle a painful counterpoint to the hollowness inside me. My new apartment wasn't so much a home as it was a box to keep my things in. The silence, broken only by the hum of traffic outside, was oppressive. Here, there was nobody to distract me from the full weight of my mistakes. Mark, the grand passion that seemed worth ruining my life for, faded into a shameful memory. The thrill was long gone, replaced by a bone-deep loneliness that gnawed at me day and night. News of John's life trickled through like a leaky faucet. A mutual friend let slip that he was dating again. I tried to conjure up a feeling of indifference, but a knot tightened in my stomach. Later, at the grocery store, I spotted him with a woman by his side. She had a kind smile, and as he laughed at something she said, a flash of jealousy sliced through me. He looked happy, cared for. Everything I'd thrown away was now worn so effortlessly by someone else. Work became my escape. I threw myself into projects, stayed late, took on extra assignments. The promotions came, the bonuses, but with each accomplishment, the emptiness yawned a little wider. These had been our dreams once, the things we'd talked about building together. Now, they were just hollow victories, milestones in a life devoid of real meaning. Years blurred by in a haze of work and forced attempts at socializing. Sarah's Instagram became an exercise in self-torture. Photos of their smiling family, John holding a little boy with his same kind eyes, a life that should have been mine. News of their second child hit me hard. That future, the one full of laughter and warmth, was irrevocably gone. I knew it, yet a foolish, desperate part of me still clung to some twisted fantasy of reconciliation. Then, reality crashed down, an avalanche burying those pathetic dreams forever. Dating apps became a lifeline, a way to drown out the silence. The swiping, the dull conversations, the men who bore no resemblance to John. It was all a depressing exercise in futility. John's quiet strength, his subtle humor, the things I'd foolishly taken for granted, made every other man pale in comparison. None of them talked about restoring old engines or shared my love for dusty car shows. Finally, one night, fueled by wine and desperation, I found myself at Sarah's doorstep. It was pathetic, I knew it, but I couldn't take it anymore. I spilled everything, the regret, the shame, the all-consuming emptiness. Sarah listened patiently, but the pity in her eyes was almost worse than I could bear. The morning after, her husband called. His voice was strained, full of the disappointment I'd come to expect. But there was something else, a hint of surprise. "Look," he said, "John, he never said a bad word about you. Not even one, after everything." The realization hit me hard. All this time, maybe there was a flicker of the old John somewhere, a part of him that remembered our history with some kindness instead of just the betrayal at the end. It was a slim thread to cling to, but in my barren landscape of regret, it was all. My wife and I had been together for 10 years in total. We got married 2 years into our relationship, and I thought she was the love of my life. I wanted to be with her forever, die next to her, and spend the rest of my life next to her in the ground. Instead, she ruined all of that because she wanted some excitement in her life. When we met, our relationship was like a whirlwind. I could hardly imagine breathing without her next to me. We wanted to be together all the time, and we did everything together. There was so much passion in our relationship. Over time, that passion didn't disappear completely, but it diminished. I thought it was to be expected in a relationship that lasted as long as ours. We knew everything about each other. There was hardly anything left for us to learn. We were both busy with work and establishing our lives. We loved each other, but the fiery passion that we had was stifling. She came to me and told me about it one day, and I listened to her while she complained about it. I told her that I was happy to try what I could to reignite it. However, I didn't feel like it was gone completely. She wanted us to go and do more spontaneous things and have more adventures in our lives. I wanted that too, but it was difficult when you were working parents balancing family life and work. I didn't know when we would have the time to do all the things that we normally did and add weekend trips or date nights into the mix. After we had the conversation, I kept thinking about it, and I made sure to plan a few surprise date nights over the months that followed. It was really all I had the time to do with everything else on my plate. She seemed very appreciative of those gestures, and after a while, she stopped bringing it up. Around July, she started taking longer days in the office. She worked in advertising, so I knew that she often had late meetings with clients overseas, but she was never out until past 7 p.m. at the time. She was staying out until 8 or 9 p.m. She would come home and the kids would already be asleep. She never wanted to talk about what she was doing at work either. She would come home and tell me that she was too exhausted to go over it all and she would hop in the shower then go to bed. When I would ask her about it the following day, she would just tell me it wasn't important. It started once a week, but gradually it increased to 2 or 3 times a week. She stopped asking me about date nights or spontaneous activities. One Saturday, when we were planning on going to the beach with our kids, I walked into her bathroom to find her taking pictures of herself in her bathing suit. From the position that she was in, they were very sensual pictures. It wasn't just a quick picture at all. It was like she was posing in them. I asked her what she was doing and she just shrugged off the question and told me that she felt confident in the bathing suit and wanted to document it. I couldn't argue with anything like that. If she felt good in her skin, that was great for her. In hindsight, I knew that she was sending them to someone else. We went to the beach and we got everything set up for the day ahead. I was focusing on playing with the kids while my wife was lying back and tanning. I was helping my son build a sand castle when a man walked up to my wife. She stood up and hugged him while she was in her bikini, mind you. It was hard not to notice the hand placement on her lower back as they embraced. It raised a lot of red flags for me. Immediately, I walked over to them and introduced myself to the man. He was good-looking, a lot younger than my wife, probably in his mid-20s. I found out he, Henry we'll call him, was a recent hire at the company my wife worked at. They made a big deal about how it was such coincidence that they ran into each other at the beach. Apparently, he had gone there alone and my wife invited him to join us. I was a little taken aback by it. I thought we were going there to spend time with our kids and she was inviting this coworker to join us. I couldn't say anything about it there, so I just welcomed him. I went back to playing with my children while I kept an eye on my wife and Henry. They were having a wonderful time together, talking and laughing. They even went off to walk in the water together. I went with my kids to the water and we started collecting shells. Because my kids were in the water, I was paying very close attention to them and I wasn't looking at my wife. When we were finished, I went to take my kids back to our spot and saw that my wife and Henry were both gone. Right away, I was suspicious. I looked around to see if they were walking around the water or maybe on the boardwalk or pier, but I didn't see them anywhere. I sat down with my kids and put some more sunblock on them while they ate some of the snacks that we brought with us. After about 10 minutes, my wife and Henry found us on the towels. They were each carrying a few ice cream cones in their hands and they told me that they had gone to go grab them. There was an ice cream shop on the boardwalk within my view and I didn't recall seeing them there. On top of that, they were making it seem like there was a long line, but if that was the shop they went to, I knew there wasn't. I could tell that they were lying. I just didn't know why they were lying about going off with each other. When we got home later that night, I asked my wife about it, telling her that I was a little suspicious about what happened. She laughed at me like it was crazy for me to think something was going on. She made me feel like an idiot for even thinking about it. Nothing she said eased my mind at all. I was still very suspicious about whatever she had going on with Henry. After the beach, the late nights kept happening and I felt like she was withdrawing from me even more than she was before. That went on for a couple of months until I gave in and decided to hire a private investigator. It felt like an invasion of privacy and I never wanted to be that partner, but there was something wrong and my wife clearly wasn't going to be honest with me. The private investigator kept an eye on my wife for about a week before he came back to me with some intel. He produced several pictures of my wife with Henry. They were in their office after hours when everybody else had gone home. On top of that, he provided me with some video evidence of my wife sneaking out of my house in the middle of the night to meet Henry in his car. They had sex right there in our driveway. I knew something was happening, but seeing the evidence made it real. It hurt more than anything I could have ever imagined. Honestly, when I saw it, a part of me died. I didn't know what to do. I thought she was the love of my life. She was my wife and she was who I decided to spend my time on earth with. I thought about what the investigator showed me over the next couple of days, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the information I had. There was no way I would stay with my wife after what she did. After seeing the video of her sneaking out of our house, I knew that she went to sleep with him that day at the beach. Something in my gut told me that was the case. I didn't want to just divorce her though. I wanted to get some kind of revenge on her. I really wanted her to regret what she did. It was the end of September when the private investigator gave me the information that he did. Every Halloween, my wife and I threw a Halloween party for all of our friends and coworkers. We both loved the holiday and we went all out for it. I got my mom to watch our kids so we could actually let loose and not have to worry about them for a little while. I figured that humiliating my wife in front of all of her friends and coworkers was a worthy punishment, so I played it cool throughout the month and I helped plan the party knowing that I was going to ruin it for her. When the day finally came, everybody showed up and of course she invited Henry. He was very friendly with my wife and they were obviously eyeing each other all night long. About halfway through the party, before everybody was too drunk to forget about what I was going to say, I stood up on the coffee table and got everyone's attention. When everybody was looking at me, I told them everything. I told them about how I found out my wife was having an affair and how I thought she even snuck off while she was spending time with me and her kids to sleep with Henry. My wife tried to physically drag me down from the coffee table, but I wouldn't let her. She told me that it was not true and she told everybody else that I was just drunk and didn't know what I was talking about, but I had photographic evidence and I showed that to everyone. I think everybody at the party took that as a cue to leave early. When everyone was gone, my wife confronted me about it and told me that I humiliated her. All I did was ask her why she did it. She told me that she needed the excitement and with Henry it was there. It wasn't that he was any different than me. He didn't offer her anything that I couldn't, but she was excited about the affair. They were spontaneous and they would have sex in public quite often. That was what she wanted when she asked me about our passion dying out. She tried to frame it as my problem. I wouldn't sneak off with her at restaurants to sleep with her in the bathroom, so it was my fault she cheated. She even told me they started sleeping together in the office because there was so much risk involved. She was right about that. There was a lot of risk involved with that and I was going to make sure she knew that. I told my wife that I was going to be divorcing her and that I wanted her to get out of the house. Thankfully, she understood where I was coming from and she went to stay with her friend for a while. The following day, I reached out to the HR department at my wife's work and I told them about what was happening. I sent them the pictures I had of her and Henry at the office. I found out that both my wife and Henry were fired from their jobs. My wife was pissed off at me about that and she told me that because I got her fired, she was going to be going after alimony and the divorce settlement. We went through the divorce and I kept everything and she was owed absolutely nothing from me. When I explained what happened at the beach, I think that sealed her fate for custody as well. I was awarded custody of the kids, but she still had visitations and weekend visits. Now she's petitioning to have custody again. The thing is, she's a good mom, but her actions at the beach kind of made me worry that she might not always have her kids' best interest in mind. I'm focusing on my family right now. Divorce is difficult for kids and I want to make sure they are adjusting as well as they can. I don't know if I'll be dating anytime in the future, but I'm open to possible connections happening organically. OP, your wife did come to you and she expressed how she felt, but it doesn't seem like she really gave you much of a chance to fix the issues she saw in the relationship. It is natural for the passion to die down after a while in a relationship, so it seemed like she was really grasping at straws for something. I think that cheating and using needing excitement as an excuse is pitiful. She threw away her life and family for a little excitement. There is never a good excuse for it, don't get me wrong, but that seems like a cop-out. I agree, I think her actions at the beach definitely make it seem like she might not be looking out for your children as much as you. I think she'll have a hard time swaying any judge in her direction for custody. It's good that they both got fired from their jobs. It seems like she knew from the moment that she met him that she wanted to sleep with him, and that's what she did. Anyways, let's now move on to our next story. My girlfriend and I started dating in college during our senior year, and we had been together ever since. After graduation, she and I moved into a house with a couple of our other friends from school. None of us had great jobs, so we were kind of forced into that living situation because it was all we could afford. At the time, we didn't think about the issues that we would face living together so soon in our relationship. Now, as an adult with more experience, I would never start living with someone after only dating them for 6 months. At the time, though, it seemed like the best thing in the world. During the pandemic, we were both working at home, sharing a bedroom, and virtually unable to leave the house. Don't get me wrong, I loved her. Even though we had our difficulties, she was somebody that I saw myself being with forever. I honestly figured that a lot of the issues that we had were because of our proximity and just being around each other 24/7. Everybody needs space in a relationship, and it wasn't possible for us. When things started to improve and we were both able to work hybrid in our offices, we were very excited. I felt like we had some breathing room again, and the relationship started getting back to normal. We also started doing things to spend a little more time apart. That sounds bad, but I think we both realized it was what we needed for the relationship. I was very active in the fitness community, and she was learning how to play the guitar. After a couple of months of us being apart more often, things started to feel like they were back to normal. Throughout our entire relationship, our sex life had always been amazing. Even when we were arguing with each other, it never really slowed down. I started to notice after we were spending more time apart that she seemed less interested in me. I was so used to us having sex at least 4 or 5 times a week that it struck me as odd. I was the only one initiating it when it happened, which was also unusual. She didn't seem disinterested, but when we were finished there was a disconnect. We weren't cuddling as much, or there wasn't as much pillow talk after. It felt impersonal. Over time, sex with us became more of a rarity. I talked to some of my friends about it, and they told me that it could be normal in long-term relationships to feel that disinterest. They also suggested that maybe my girlfriend was having a tough time emotionally or mentally. I decided to talk to her about it one night, and she told me that there wasn't anything going on, that she just hadn't been thinking about it. We ended up having sex after that conversation when we both established what was going on. I won't get into all of the gory details, but a couple of weeks later I started noticing some issues I was having with my genitals, so I went to the doctor. He told me that I had an STD. I was surprised to hear that and immediately thought it was wrong. The only person I was having sex with was my girlfriend, and I knew that she and I were both negative for everything. Admittedly, we weren't testing often because when we started dating we were both negative for everything. I figured it must have been something that I picked up at the gym or from sharing a drink with someone, but the doctor told me that the likelihood of me getting the particular disease that I had that way was slim. There was a 99% chance that it was transmitted to me sexually. I drove home and thought about how I was going to tell my girlfriend. At the time, it never occurred to me that she was the one who gave me the STD. I trusted her and I never would have thought that she would do something to hurt me, but eventually I started to put the pieces together. Obviously, I had to get the STD from somewhere. If I didn't get it through other means, the only way that I got it was through my girlfriend. The question was, how did she get it? I started thinking about how distant she had been and how much time we were spending apart, and it clicked. She must have been having some kind of affair. I figured that if she lied about it, as long as she did, she probably wasn't going to tell the truth when I confronted her. I wanted to see what was happening without allowing her to cover anything up or lie about it. She knew that I was going to the doctor because of an issue that I was having, so it was very likely that she was already aware of the STD. She had to have had it too. I composed myself and prepared for all the questions she was probably going to ask me. When she did, I told her that the doctor examined me and ran some tests, but I wouldn't know the results for a few days. I figured that would give me some time to do some digging and see what was really going on. Later that night, I went through her phone. I saw a recent text message chat with her guitar instructor and I clicked on it. Their most recent messages were talking about how I was going to the doctor to get tested. They were both swearing up and down that they didn't have any symptoms and didn't know, but they both planned on going too. That alone told me that they were sleeping together, but I read through other messages while I was looking. It seemed like my girlfriend met him in a cafe and started talking to him about starting guitar lessons. From there, she decided to go, and after her first lesson, he told her he liked her. She actually told him that she had a boyfriend and he said that he didn't care. From there, they came up with a plan to hook up for the first time without me knowing. It was a tricky situation trying to figure out how to break up with my girlfriend. We still lived together and we were on a lease together, which legally bound us to stay in the same apartment. However, when we moved in, all of us got together and made a roommate agreement that we all signed where we went over some house rules. We wanted a drama-free, good environment for everybody to live in. If we felt like there was any sort of hostility or negativity, if we had a majority vote, we could get somebody else to move out. I didn't know if a document like that would hold up if I wanted my girlfriend to move out, but I figured I could at least bring it up. I sent myself evidence from those messages and I pretended like everything was fine for the next couple of days. I read through our lease and the document that all four of us made together to try to figure out what my best option would be. I wanted my girlfriend out of the house. I knew it was going to be a struggle for her to find another place to live and to pay for it on her own, and I wanted her to go through that. My girlfriend kept asking me about the results of my test and I kept lying to her and telling her that I was still waiting. I pulled my other roommates aside one day while she was out for her guitar lesson and I told them about what was going on. They were as shocked as I was by the news, but they seemed to be on my side. She was a liar and she was a cheater who would take that side. I told them about the document and they said that if I wanted to stay they would be on my side and would do what they had to help get her to leave. She came home later that day to find all three of us sitting in the living room and waiting for her. I told her everything, telling her that she transmitted an STD to me because of her affair and that I knew about what was happening with her guitar instructor. She tried to apologize and pull me aside to explain what was happening in more detail, but I didn't want to listen. I told her that we needed to talk about the living arrangements because I was breaking up with her. After that, she started getting defensive. She clearly didn't want to move out. Our other roommates were on my side and they were with me in voting to kick her out of the house. She said that she was going to stay because the document we had wasn't legally binding, but one of my roommates brought up that since we all agreed to it and signed it, it would likely hold up in court. I told my girlfriend that I was willing to go to court over the matter. I think she realized that the living situation was going to be uncomfortable and she decided that moving out would probably be the best option for her. While she was in the process of doing that, I ended up going home for a week to avoid her. While I was there, I just kept thinking about the guitar instructor and how he said he didn't care that she was in a relationship. Clearly, if he was transmitting an STD to her, he was sleeping around recklessly. I looked him up online and I saw that he had a decent following for his social media accounts. He was trying really hard to make a name for himself as a musician. A lot of the followers that he had thought he was cute and were shooting their shots with him. I decided to put an end to that. I commented on a bunch of his posts about how he gave an STD to my girlfriend. I left reviews on his business accounts and I even made a TikTok to make a video explaining everything. He blocked me when he realized what was happening, but I made more accounts. It was the point where he was turning comments off on some of his videos. The thing about not having comments on videos is that it gets less engagement. He was getting much less traction than he was before, which was my goal. When my girlfriend officially moved out, I went back home and I was happy to be without her. I'm just glad that it's over now. OP, it sounds like the relationship in general was pretty toxic, but it is a shame that it took an affair to bring attention to that. The pandemic put a lot of stress on a lot of couples, so I can understand what was happening with you guys then. It definitely seems like your girlfriend was looking for some kind of way out, and she found it with a guitar instructor. Cheating is never okay. If you're unhappy in a relationship, you should end it over cheating. It's a shame that she went about her affair the way that she did. It's common sense that if you were cheating on someone, you should be using protection to avoid transmitting a disease to them. It is reckless, immature, and frankly, disgusting. It's nice that your roommates were on your side and voted to kick her out of the apartment. No doubt that caused some extra drama with the house, and it seemed like they were averse to that. But now that she's gone, everything is probably going to be pretty good for you guys. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.